The most tense part of a Russian fighter intercept is not the moment most people imagine. At 10:14 a.m. over the Black Sea, roughly 45 miles south of Sevastopol, the steady hum inside a U.S. Navy P-8A Poseidon is suddenly broken by a series of sharp metallic impacts. This is not normal turbulence. It is the wake from a Russian Su-35S Flanker E cutting across the Poseidon's nose upside down, barely 15 feet ahead. The Russian pilot is not simply showing his presence. He is using the powerful airflow from his Saturn AL-41F1S engines to shake the much larger American surveillance aircraft and disrupt its stability. In the rear of the P-8, sensor operators are thrown against their consoles as the $175 million aircraft jolts through the disturbed air. But that sudden shock is only the distraction. A new warning appears on the electronic warfare system, not from the jet, from the Crimean coastline. A battery of S-400 Triumph systems has locked onto the aircraft, simulating a full multi-domain engagement. Here is how the next 11 minutes of high-stakes escalation unfolded. The P-8A Poseidon is, at its core, a Boeing 737 transformed into one of the most advanced submarine hunting and surveillance platforms in the world. It is not built like a fighter, it has no afterburners, and it is not designed for close-range aerial maneuvers. Its greatest strength is information. But at 10:16 a.m., that information became deeply unsettling. The Su-35S, likely operating from Belbek Air Base, performed a maneuver sometimes described as a headbutt. The Russian pilot accelerated to more than 900 miles per hour, pulled alongside the P-8, and then rolled over the American cockpit in a high-G barrel roll. The distance was so close that the U.S. crew could see the rivets on the underside of the flanker, along with the gray-white tips of the R-73 short-range air-to-air missiles mounted near its wingtips. "Contact, contact, Ghost One, we are being painted," the P-8 mission commander calls over the internal comms. That is the moment the wider response network comes alive. The Poseidon may look alone, but it is not. High above, far beyond visual range, two U.S. Air Force F-35A Lightning IIs are holding position at 48,000 feet. They are flying in a clean internal configuration to preserve their low observable profile. To the Su-35's radar, the sky appears empty. But to the F-35 pilots, the entire Black Sea has become a digital chessboard. Through the multifunction advanced data link, the F-35s receive the P-8's sensor feed in real time. They see the Su-35. They track the S-400 radar activity along the coast. And then they detect a third force entering the situation. Under NATO's Southern Air Policing mission, two Royal Air Force Eurofighter Typhoons launch from Mihail Kogalniceanu Air Base in Romania. They are the third force entering the Black Sea standoff, and they are not ordinary Typhoons. These are modern Tranche 3 variants fitted with the Captor EAESA radar and carrying one of the most respected beyond visual range air-to-air systems in Europe, the Meteor. The Russian Su-35 pilot believes he is in control. His nose is still pointed toward the P-8, and he begins cycling through his targeting system, imitating the steps of an R-77 engagement sequence. He is trying to provoke a response. He wants to see whether the U.S. Navy crew will back down. By 10:19 a.m., the situation has shifted from a risky intercept into something far more serious. On the Crimean coast, Russian ground-based radar begins rapidly changing frequencies, attempting to push through the P-8's electronic countermeasures. From the Russian side, this appears to be a test of a new cooperative targeting method. The Su-35 provides the forward view, while the S-400 batteries on the ground supply the long-range pressure. But there is one problem. The Russians are still treating the encounter like a traditional one-aircraft versus one-aircraft contest. The RAF Typhoons, racing over the water at Mach 1.6, are now tied into the wider U.S. Navy and Allied data network. This is cooperative engagement in action. The F-35s remain quiet and difficult to detect, acting as the forward coordinators without revealing themselves. They do not activate their radars. Instead, they use their electro-optical targeting systems to follow the Su-35's heat signature from nearly 60 miles away. That information is then passed directly to the RAF Typhoons. Suddenly, the Russian pilot's warning receiver lights up with confusing signals. His instruments suggest he is being tracked from the west, while his infrared sensors detect fast-moving high-energy signatures approaching from the south. "You have the lead, London," the F-35 flight lead sends over Link 16. The RAF pilots now take control of the aerial chessboard. They do not simply fly straight toward the Su-35. They split the space around him. One Typhoon remains high and places a controlled radar track on the Russian fighter, just enough to show the pilot he is being watched, but not enough to push the situation past the edge. The second Typhoon drops low, descending to around 500 feet above the waves. At nearly 800 miles per hour, it blends into the sea clutter, making it far harder to track cleanly. The Russian pilot understands what is happening. The space around him is closing. He breaks away from the P-8, pulling a hard 9G turn and releasing defensive countermeasures into the air behind him. Moments earlier, he was applying pressure. Now he is trying to find a way out. As he turns, he exposes his weakest angle back toward the coastline. At 10:28 a.m., the Su-35 pilot, now burning through fuel and surrounded by electronic confusion, receives an urgent order to return to base. He lights the afterburners and pushes the aircraft hard, racing back toward the protection of his own air defense zone. The P-8A Poseidon steadies out and returns to its original course. But inside the aircraft, the mission has never stopped. The sensor operators have been working the entire time, quietly capturing every signal, every frequency change, and every electronic trace the Russian systems exposed. For the last 10 minutes, Russia has been broadcasting the electronic fingerprint of one of its most advanced air defense networks. The third force in the encounter, the RAF Typhoons, slide into position beside the P-8. One of the British pilots gives a sharp salute toward the U.S. Navy crew, a silent recognition that this was never just about aircraft in the sky. This was a system of systems at work. Russia did not simply pressure a U.S. aircraft, it accidentally revealed its own weaknesses. In trying to intimidate a single patrol plane, Moscow exposed reaction times, radar behavior, frequency ranges, and handoff procedures across its Crimean defense sector. They showed their cards, and the United States and the United Kingdom recorded every second of it. For the Kremlin, the strategic result is embarrassing. A Russian Su-35 costs roughly $85 million. An S-400 battery can cost more than $600 million. To stage this provocation, Russia burned through fuel, maintenance hours, and operational readiness. NATO's response, by contrast, became a real-world training event at no extra cost. They gained rare intelligence without launching a single physical strike. And that is where the real story begins. The Su-35 is an impressive machine. It is fast, agile, and powerful. But the United States and NATO are no longer relying only on metal, speed, and engine thrust. They are operating through sensors, networks, and data. When the Su-35 pilot rolled over the P-8, he was thinking in the language of old-school aerial intimidation. When the F-35 pilot tracked him, he was thinking in data fusion. The Russian pilot was flying an aircraft. The American and British pilots were operating inside a connected combat network. This encounter proved that in the modern battle space, the advantage does not always belong to the loudest jet or the most aggressive pilot. It belongs to the side that can see the entire theater as one connected digital system. Russia tried to pressure the U.S. military. Instead, it became one of the most expensive data points NATO could ever ask for. But then the situation shifts again. At the Sevastopol Integrated Defense Center, the Russian commander watches the Su-35 retreat and decides to raise the pressure. He authorizes the activation of the Monolith B coastal surveillance radar, a system designed to provide over-the-horizon tracking for 3 M5 4-caliber cruise missiles and K-300P Bastion P coastal defense systems. Within seconds, the Black Sea is flooded with powerful radio emissions. The Russian side is trying to overwhelm NATO's sensors. But the U.S. Navy has been waiting for exactly this moment. Near the Turkish coast, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer is already monitoring the region. Its Aegis combat system immediately identifies the Monolith B signature. The signal is unique and the match is instant. The destroyer does not launch a weapon. It answers with electronic warfare. Using its AN/SLQ-32V 7 Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program, the U.S. ship pushes false tracks into the Russian radar picture. On screens inside Crimea, 5 NATO aircraft suddenly become 55. Russian S-400 operators begin seeing incoming signatures from every direction: aircraft, drones, and fast-moving objects that are not actually there. 50 inbound tracks. Sector 4 is compromised, the Russian controller shouts. That is the power of the integrated engagement network. While Russian operators are trying to sort real signals from digital decoys, the actual NATO assets are already moving with precision. The RAF Typhoons have boxed in the Su-35. The F-35s have fixed the S-400 battery's positions to within 3 feet. Had even one Russian launch command been carried through, the response would have come almost instantly. The F-35s were positioned to employ AGM-88G anti-radiation systems against the S-400 radar network, while the RAF Typhoons were ready to release Meteor missiles to force the Su-35 out of the fight before it could regain control of the situation. To understand why the Russian side lost the advantage, you have to understand the systems that were quietly tracking them during this encounter. The RAF Typhoons were carrying the Meteor, one of the most advanced beyond visual range air-to-air missiles in service. Unlike older systems such as the AIM-12OD AMRAAM, which relies on a solid fuel motor that burns out early in flight, the Meteor uses a throttleable ducted rocket, essentially a ramjet. That allows it to maintain extremely high speed and still have energy left in the final phase of the intercept. For the Su-35, that changes everything. Its agility, thrust vectoring, and evasive maneuvers matter far less when the incoming system can keep adjusting, keep accelerating, and keep closing the distance. In simple terms, the Meteor creates a no-escape zone far larger than what Russian pilots are used to dealing with. On the American side, the F-35s were prepared with AIM-12OD AMRAAMs, a proven long-range air-to-air system with a range of more than 100 miles and a two-way data link. That means the F-35 can guide the missile deep into the engagement without forcing it to activate its own radar too early. For the opposing pilot, that can mean very little warning until the final moments. Then there is the S-400. On paper, it is one of the most feared surface-to-air defense systems in the world. Its long-range interceptors are designed to reach targets hundreds of miles away. But every air defense system depends on one thing above all else: reliable radar information. And that is where the Russian side ran into a serious problem. As the US Navy demonstrated with its electronic response, a radar picture can become unreliable very quickly. If the operators cannot tell what is real and what is false, even the most expensive long-range interceptor becomes far less useful. Speed and range mean nothing if the system is chasing shadows. Behind all of this technology were human decisions made under extreme pressure. On the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, the US Navy tactical action officer had only seconds to judge the situation. Was this the beginning of a wider confrontation, or was it a dangerous attempt to provoke a reaction? He chose electronic control instead of physical escalation. By not launching a Standard Missile 6, he helped prevent the situation from spiraling into something far larger. But by using the ship's electronic warfare suite, he still sent a clear message. NATO had the advantage, and Russia knew it. The RAF pilots showed something just as important. NATO is not simply the United States with supporting partners. It is a fully connected multinational force. The coordination between a British Typhoon and an American F-35 has reached a level where the pilots do not always need to speak over the radio. Their aircraft share data faster than a human voice ever could. By 11 a.m., the P-8A Poseidon lands safely back at base. The crew is exhausted, the adrenaline is fading, but the mission has delivered something extremely valuable. A hard drive full of Russian electronic signatures, radar behavior, response patterns, and operational habits. For the Kremlin, the entire move backfired. They tried to project strength. Instead, they exposed weaknesses. They tried to pressure a U.S. aircraft. Instead, they became the ones being studied, tracked, and analyzed. In the end, NATO did not need to bring down the Su-35 to prove the point. It only needed to show that it could control the entire situation from multiple directions at once. That is the reality of modern air power. The side that wins is not always the side with the fastest jet or the boldest pilot. It is the side that sees more, connects faster, and understands the full picture before the other side even realizes the game has changed. To the Russian pilots who thought their close-pass maneuvers would send a message, the reality was very different. They were not controlling the scene. They were part of it. And for the sailors and air crews of the U.S. 6th Fleet and the Royal Air Force, this was another reminder that the Black Sea is not shaped by intimidation. It is shaped by coordination, discipline, and the ability to see the entire battlefield as one connected system. What surprised you most about this high-altitude chess match? Was it the RAF's Third Force intervention with the Meteor missile, or the U.S. Navy's ability to fill Russian radar screens with false tracks? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read your tactical breakdowns to see who truly understands how this system of systems approach works. And if you want to stay ahead of the technology shaping global power, subscribe and turn on notifications. We bring you the systems, the strategy, and the technical truth that most coverage misses. This is the future of air power. This is the integrated engagement chain, and after this encounter, it remains unbeaten.